alert, rat alert.
Have you ever been trying to find a gravesite, but you just couldn't locate that corpse?
Anything.
Is this Billy's funeral? Is that the corpse of Billy Newwood? Tom!
Well, you're not alone. Today's meme is the classic sarcastic Willy Wonka, one of my personal favorites, who asks believers where Christ's gravesite is, and that unless bodily remains from a gravesite can be produced, then Christ is just a myth and never existed. On the surface, it seems like a fair enough question, and would probably make for an episode on Bones, since the characters in that show are fairly anti-theist anyways. But it doesn't take an emotionless, monotone-speaking scientist to figure this one out. It only takes a little common sense, a dash of history, a teaspoon of Bible, and a smidgen of critical thinking. First, ask yourself, what do gravesites actually prove? Sure, they serve as markers for the final resting places of the dearly departed, but they're not the ultimate source of evidence for someone's existence. Headstones can be destroyed and graves unmarked. Sometimes gravestones mark locations where there are no bodies. Bodies can be dug up, stolen, or moved. One can't even be sure the right body is located under a gravestone, much less a body at all, unless one digs it up to ID it. Sometimes people are lost at sea or in fires in which no body can be salvaged for a gravesite. Ultimately, grave markers aren't that reliable. Take Doc Holliday, for example. He has a gravesite in Colorado and Georgia. His body can't be under both of them, unless it's in pieces. So when it comes to gravesites, there are clearly a plethora of reasons.
A plethora? Oh, yes. You have a plethora.
Yes, a plethora of reasons why gravestones are not the most convincing sources of evidence for a particular person's existence. We usually rely on many other evidential sources to confirm the existence of historical figures, and to prove my point, here are a list of historical figures whose final resting places are unknown or disputed. So if you seriously need verified gravesites to believe someone existed, then you must not believe any of these other historical figures existed either. But we know these people existed because we have other forms of evidence other than gravesites, which is exactly the case with Jesus. We have other forms of evidence to prove he existed. Gravesites need not apply. Lastly, there is a giant elephant in the room that hasn't been addressed yet. It is incredibly ironic that people would desire the corpse of Jesus to conclude he existed when the Bible declares Jesus rose from the dead and then later ascended to heaven, leaving no body behind. It makes me wonder if these skeptics have even read the Bible. If they do know the story, but just don't believe the story is true, then asking for a corpse is redundant. It is therefore a win-win situation for the skeptic. Either there is no body because Jesus didn't exist, or there is no body because Jesus rose from the dead, which still leaves no corpse behind as evidence, and thus the skeptic can again conclude Jesus didn't exist. Christians, on the other hand, argue that it is precisely because there is no corpse that the story of Jesus rising from the dead is confirmed. The issue all hinges on the prerequisite of a body, and as long as the doubters require a body, and the believers require no body, neither side will be swayed since there is no corpse to speak of. But enough about Christ's body. What about his grave? Well, the Bible says that Jesus was taken off the cross and placed in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea until he rose from the dead 3 days later. Where this tomb is precisely located today is not known with any certainty, but many traditionally believe it to be here. Over the years, many people have claimed to have found Jesus' tomb, finding crypts in Israel with Christ's original Hebrew name on them, overlooking the fact that Christ's name was not unique where he lived 2,000 years ago, as many men had the same Hebrew name as he did. The point is, we can't say for sure exactly where he was buried, but it is possible that this church is correct, in which case we would then have Christ's gravesite, just with no body. So if I were to put on my conservative Baptist Christian hat, I'd respond to this meme by saying, boy, you can go to his grave in Israel if you want, and his body ain't there, because he rose again on the third day. Hallelujah! So in recap, Christ's gravesite is a poor requirement needed to determine if he existed. Since the Bible says no body was left behind, gravesites don't provide absolute proof of existence anyways, and there are countless other historical figures whose existence we never question, despite having no gravesites or having disputed gravesites. In short summary, this is a poor argument, and it should be buried 6 feet under. Thank you for watching Red Rebuttal. Please feel free to comment below with your thoughts and opinions on the video. If you like my work, please be sure to like or share my videos. More importantly, if you have any anti-Christian memes or cartoons you want rebutted, email me at redrebuttal@gmail.com.